some of the rights, the companies around publishing and mechanical rights that have sprung up, and the various databases that have come up, and how that plays into what RSong is doing. And it's fascinating if you have something that is focused primarily on the independent market and what they're and yeah, just so artists who own their rights, um, then you end up not engaging a big sector of the market. There are so many companies and um, players within the ecosystem that um, you know are about the existing rights management and royalty streams on the basis of the existing rights management. Um, that if you're trying to provide something that's transparent and supports the artist, you end up not really engaging with a lot of the infrastructure, which I think is both a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing in the sense that you have less to worry about, except that you can't not worry about these players, if you catch my drift. Hopefully that wasn't too vague, but just suggestive enough for people to
Yeah,
kind
I
of get.
understand that one. I understand. Based on the conversations that we had yesterday, I absolutely understand that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it was fascinating to me. And I can kind of get why, you have to really tread very, very carefully in this space.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Anyone else got news or updates?
I'll chime in and just say that I spent the last few days over at the Polestar conference, and one of the highlights at the event was attending their blockchain panel. And during the panel, a handful of I guess those that have spent the most amount of money on marketing their existence were there speaking. Companies ranging from Aventus to Block Party, Tarry, and the guy that built out a blockchain plan and ended up being bought out for a few $1 million and is now VP of blockchain products over at Ticketmaster. But everyone is having the same issues around scalability, speed. What are the options for blockchains that exist to get to a point where an entity can sell, you know, 40,000, 50,000 tickets over 5 minutes? It doesn't exist yet. And
Mhm.
so this is certainly the I would say the core conversation that I heard during their panel is the issues around scalability. Everyone is preparing their smart contracts and all the magic that blockchain promises to do, but everyone is waiting to find out what will be the ultimate platform that would allow for scalability and speed.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. The interesting thing is that hand in hand with scalability and speed comes this additional attendant risk, right? If you can pump, 40, 50,000 transactions through in a very short period of time, if there's an exploit to be had, it will be exploited much more aggressively and much faster once you have that kind of performance. So security goes hand in hand with
Yes.
performance.
Yes, it does.
You cannot avoid it, and that's where I think we have a particular leg up. Um,
I also think about we've spoken about the music ecosystem, and we've spent quite a bit of time in the last few weeks talking about mycelia, artist identity. And additionally, on the flip side of it, where we've spoken about it briefly, but not really swam into it, is the whole idea of the fan and how we reward fans within a music ecosystem. And I would say that one thing that Ticketmaster has started to do, which is helping them on how they're selling tickets, is they have a whole program for their verified fan. And I would like to believe that in the future, as we build out the works that we're doing, that we will have that fan base as well. We will establish, on the music platform, connected to other things within the ecosystem. We know who the artists are, and we know who the verified fans are because they're participating in the system, which will then make it easier for them to purchase tickets for concerts and events that are running through our platform. I
Hmm.
wonder though, will a verified fan also need to go through a KYC process? Because I recognize that there is a need for the KYC when it comes down to artists receiving monies or tokens or cryptocurrencies and micropayments. I'm understanding that. But will the fan also need to move through a KYC process in order to be approved to be part of the system?
Well, that's where I thought Imogen had a really good insight, which is that identity is a social thing. It's not an individual thing.
Hmm.
It's directly related to the kinds of social behaviors that are associated with, going to concerts and performances. So, if you get 50 people at a concert who are all willing to attest that, that's Fabian there in the picture, along with all of us, then that is a distributed, decentralized kind of KYC process.
Yeah,
You
but will the IRS accept that? Because if we're like dropping, incentive tokens and things to them as they attend these events, yeah, I'm not sure. I think we need a good lawyer because now they're receiving cryptos, and we may need more than a social identity.
I also
Yeah,
have a question about that too, but maybe answer Ned's question and then I have another question.
no, go ahead. Throw it out there, Nora.
Well, so I definitely agree that identity is a social thing, and I think it's I think it's definitely true that 50 people could identify Fabian as in a picture, and then that could be used to, allow him access to something. But couldn't some billionaire or corporation or whatever influence us all to verify something that's not true? Like we see in Congress, there are special interests that have influenced hundreds of our representatives to deny the existence of climate change for profit, for example. Like people's minds have been totally hijacked to do much worse than just say, "Oh, that's not my friend in a picture." Like they're actually destroying the world, for example, just to I don't know.
Yeah.
Pluck a you mentioned the crypto winter. How about we just delete winter from planet Earth in 20 years and see how that goes? Um, Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. I've been up for a few hours. Anyway, I was just wondering how, if we use identity as a sort of socially intacting, I don't know, if we are all responsible as a group to verify the identity of ourselves and each other, how can we make sure that we ourselves are not corrupt
Yeah.
to being influenced by outside sources?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
my
that's
That's a great
the
point. I just want to add one thing, Greg,
Mhm.
which is just historically, witness identification in criminal cases has been proven to have a very, very low percentage of veracity.
Yeah, so I think both of those points are very important, and they call to think what I was trying to say. So if you have a centralized institution that is verifying identity, then you've placed all your trust in that centralized institution. And now you have a single point of failure, which is that if that institution becomes corrupt, then your source of truth with respect to identity is corrupt. And the same principle begins to operate when you sort of with low numbers. So if you're counting on one or two or three witnesses to verify, then again, the likelihood that they could either be corrupted or in some way inaccurate is, very high. But it's decentralization, the fact that it's not a single source of truth or even a small number of source of truths. But, Fabian was at the London concert and the Singapore concert and the Tokyo concert, and each of the audiences were different. And now we have thousands of people who are all saying, yep, that's Fabian. Then we have a different kind of measure of veracity. Do you see what I'm driving at? It's actually decentralization that is the issue. And now if you have and 1, 2, 3 institutions and a few hundred people, you can start to get a sense that maybe we can trust this.
You're saying the fact that, just to continue with my example, the fact that we've put our trust in Congress, which used to work and maybe could work again, is really the issue, that they are the centralized entity in my example.
So in your example, yes, there's so there are 100 senators. Yeah, that's 100 people, and how many people are in the U.S.? So can you, with a bounded amount of resources, corrupt 100 people? The likelihood is very, very high. Can you, with a bounded number of resources, corrupt 1 million people?
Nazi Germany.
It starts to get higher. It's not impossible. I mean, it's the same. Biology faces this all the time. The war between plants and insects is not a we win this forever kind of war. It's much more of a balancing game, right? So the insects figure out, a good food source amongst the plants in the garden, and the plants respond by evolving, right? They develop certain defense systems. So this is always the kind of thing that's a dynamical balance, not a once and for all solution. I think that's the first thing we have to accept.
I don't accept that, Greg, because we're not plants and we're not bees. We're human. And I will always go back to Nazi Germany or Rwanda or any other place where a country as a whole has been corrupted. And so I just have issues with that. I'm sorry.
So no, but I think those issues are really worth looking at. I think it's a really, really good conversation, right? I think that I think Rwanda was exactly the kind of situation that I was saying, where you have a bounded population of influencers that you corrupt, and then the rest of the country falls. And what you want to do is to increase the total number of potential testifiers, right? I mean, it was exactly the same issue with the 2008 debacle. There were not enough eyeballs on the financial models for someone to stand up and credibly say the emperor has no clothes.
But the eyeballs were corrupted as well because of their self-interest of money. So there were eyeballs, and they just chose not to say anything.
Well, and this kind of gets back to identity, which is why I even brought up the government in the first place, is because people can get so easily corrupted by money or other interests that are related to money. Like, for example, our elections and different things like that are being corrupted. And I think, we have an opportunity now with this technology. I know probably a lot of people are not connecting music, probably think it's kind of a silly thing, but I think it's actually really profound that we have a chance in these creative fields to solve some problems that really could impact things that are a lot more serious than music, which I already take very seriously. But you know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, it really, this stuff is all very related, even though probably to some people listening right now, they're like, what is going on with the ant people and the music thing and the crypto winter? But it's connected. Okay, it's connected. That's all I'm saying.
so, I don't
Well,
want to be all doom and gloom because I believe that it is going to be a change in people's hearts that's going to fix this. And so I see the system as an external that is trying to get people to change, but what we really need to do is to incentivize people themselves to change. And so I'm interested in building a system that is not accounting at a high level to constrain and try to direct people, but somehow help people get to their own core heart and work from the inside out. And I think, and I don't know the answer to that, but we have so many smart people here that how do we build an external that is directly correlated to people's internal better selves, because then we'll have a fighting chance of creating a system that will change.
well,
One of the
go
oh,
ahead, Rudy. After you, Rudy.
one of the problems is that even right now, we're talking and throwing labels around without really questioning what they mean. And that's exactly how this battle can be won or lost to the extent, well, it is a battle, but it's a battle for your mind and it's a battle for your individuality. And so I think people are wise to get back to why they personally are here and what brought them here, and what does it signify that they're different than the person next to them. What does individuality mean? And along with that, what does it mean to, how are you part of everything? So it's a very tough paradox, made all the tougher by the fact that interests that gain power and money and comfort and all that sort of thing are always organizing to distract any outliers who would take away from their own power. So, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but I don't put a whole lot of trust in labels. In fact, none, pretty much. We have to use them because they're shortcuts to being able to get it out of our mouths and say something to somebody. But when you say right, left, good, bad, any of those things, you have to have there's a certain apparatus you need to switch on at all times. So anyway, sorry if that's about as clear as mud. I guess I've done my job.
Well, I mean, I like what everyone is saying. I mean, I think, Ned, you arrive at a decentralist position, just by a different route. At the end of the day, you'd like to empower um, individuals to reconnect with what's true for them, what is heartfelt for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And
Yep.
and that I feel is essentially decentralist, rather than having some external governance on top, especially a top-down kind of structure. It comes from the bottom up, and that's sort of what I was talking about as
Yeah,
well.
no, yeah, thank you for recognizing that, because I think at heart I am probably the most radical decentralist here.
And but I think that gets back to the discussion of identity, and in particular, identity as it serves a function with respect to music, for ticketing and for for other kinds of things. I do also think that we need to be a little bit careful about um, kind of getting to extreme. Like, how do I say this? Safeway can issue coupons which clearly have value, and distribute them, in newspapers, and people don't have to report them to the IRS. So as long as the benefits sort of lie within a certain safety zone, we don't have to have a verified audience member. I think, as the uh, trust required in any sort of conversation, or as any sort of behavior that might be regulated comes into play, then we have to have a verified um, notion of identity. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, already there's a big difference between online identity, such as your Facebook login, and the kind of identity necessary to secure a home loan. Those two things are not the same. Um, uh, and and we're comfortable living in a world like that, where there are sort of a range of different notions of identity, and they have different roles and functions within our lives. And I think that we need to continue to be comfortable with that, because at the end of the day, I don't think we need to reveal everything about ourselves in order to have any particular kind of a transaction. So you don't. To me, it feels perfectly reasonable to remain anonymous while buying a loaf of bread. Um, and
Aren't you
um,
supposed to show your ID at the grocery store now? Sorry.
You can hide plastic explosives in bread just as well as anywhere else.
God.
It's
What
funny
a
that you know that
what a
fact,
what a
Rudy. How do you know that, Rudy?
I'm sorry, Greg. I'm sure that point was heading for a really nice crescendo there. I'm so sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, it's like, that's what this group is all about. I play an F sharp major. You guys have got to do a C minor over top of that.
That's what I'm here for.
So anyway, I have since 2009, when I really began to think a lot about identity. I've developed a notion of identity that I can reduce to working code. That is, it's about quality of identity. So you reveal as much of your identity as is necessary for the trust requirements of a particular interaction, or collection of interactions. And I think that's where we have to land. And those different qualities of identity are supported by different verification mechanisms. And I think we have to be comfortable with that. I mean, the fact is, we're already comfortable with that, right? Nobody, hopefully no one in this conversation is shocked that they can't take their Facebook login and use that to go secure a home loan. Um, um, so I think, it's a reasonable world to talk about, different kinds of identity that have different levels of veracity, and they're not mutually exclusive. Like, it would be, like, I think it's perfectly, it's both useful and valuable to be able to have your friends verify that that's you, that's in the picture at a concert. If for nothing else, there are all kinds of social based password recovery mechanisms that are being very seriously entertained by a lot of um, companies and organizations right now. So that would be a really good one. I forgot my password to this important digital asset or digital service. But these 50 people all, testify that it's me, and that might be sufficient to unlock or recover a password. So that's an example where it has utility. But I think where we get into trouble is when we get into this either or thinking, or a lot of black and white. It's got to be this or it's got to be that. That's where uh, we start to get into trouble. But there's lots and lots of space here for a broad range of notions of identity, many of which are perfectly valid for the purchase and resale of tickets to a concert or other kind of venues.
Where did everybody go?
I was curious as to how long the silence might last.
Well, I can tell you one thing anecdotally that's kind of a little off the mark, but it is about music. I have decided to do Opera Jupiter again as a big show group, and so I decided to inspire myself by finding out how Riverdance did it. I don't like Riverdance or Lord of the Dance, but the guy became a billionaire in 6 years. And then also Cirque du Soleil, which is a little closer to what we're trying to do, but still not quite on the money. But what I discovered is I don't have what it takes, because basically both those guys, Michael Flatley and La Liberté guy, party constantly. So I really don't have it in me. I'm going to have to find someone who likes to party.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot to say about socializing. How much of this kind of stuff is about socialization.
It's a huge piece of the equation. Um, I see Kent is on the call. Is that Kent Shikama?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for joining the call. I haven't seen you on this call, I think, ever.
I've been on this call at
Maybe a
least 10
little.
times.
All right. It's been a while. All right.
Okay.
Great.
Cool.
How are
Awesome.
things going on in your side of the world?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
How are things in the world of building RSong?
So this past week I've been working on getting the invalid parents bug fixed. So we managed to get a unit test in for that, and we should be there. Like, I sort of identified that we're somehow computing the wrong parent, even though we are indeed passing in the right justifications when the error happens. So we should be close, but yeah, it's hard to say with these bugs.
Gotcha. And if you were to put a timeline in terms of when we could build a platform on top of RSong, what would you say that timeline looks like?
Are you talking about, like, when do you think we would have a running test net that would stay up for at least a couple weeks?
Yeah.
Maybe end of April.
End of April. All right. So that's a runway. That gives me a visual. It gives me a visual to be able to take the steps that we need to do around RSong to coincide with that build.
Cool.
And outside of the bug, are there any other blockers that are taking place around the actual build?
No, we just have, so we need to get the block store in. And we have to finish our validator incentives.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's going to be, in my opinion, the trickiest part.
Yes.
And then we have work to do on speccing out the tuple space matcher, and then implementing the rest of what we have left for cost accounting. So,
Kent, I've got a question for you. Would you have a Excel document or anything of the sort that would allow us to identify if we were, when we build out a music streaming platform, what it will actually cost to do this, like what the monthly cost would be if we had this built on a shard?
I guess the hard part is that your costs will be based on whatever the validators end up charging you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess if you can give, I mean, it is possible to state something like, assuming a validator charges so much rev per gas, and assuming the price of rev is some amount of dollars. And then if you give the, I guess, whatever roll line contracts that you expect to execute, and about a rough estimate of the volume that, or this is just a rough estimate of the transactions that will be sent to those. Yeah, with those parameters, once we get the cost accounting constants in, it should be possible to estimate to some like really, I guess, volatile range what your costs will be.
Okay. And who do you think of from the team has that information for identifying what the cost accounting would be for this?
As in, who will be working on the constants, or?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're talking about building out this music platform, and I think for most of us, we still haven't identified what it will actually cost to implement on our platform.
So I think there's a difference between the implementation cost, which is essentially a one-time cost. I mean, there's a maintenance cost. Kent is talking about something else.
Oh, okay.
Kent is talking about the running of the service.
Yes.
You guys are missing each other.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait.
So what Kent is saying is how much the service is going to cost to run, and you can estimate that. But what Fabian, you're asking, how much is it going to cost us to write the additional smart contracts and or any additional code that might be necessary for example, importing stuff? Yeah, so you guys are just missing each other.
Yeah, because I guess my question is, in the vision that there's, let's imagine there's 10,000 songs. Those 10,000 songs all have a smart contract, a set of rules attributed to those songs. One song might say that this song, only 2 people are receiving monies from that song, while another song might have 20 people associated with it.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the smart contract. You write one smart contract that covers all those cases.
Okay.
Right. And in fact, to the best of my knowledge, we have a draft version of that Dan Connolly wrote back in September. So that part, yeah, you want to think about these things slightly differently. So we're writing generic infrastructure that and it's effectively write once. And so you can get a really good estimate for the kind of thing you're talking about from two data points. One is the data point associated with the cost of building what we've got in terms of RSong today, and the other is the data point associated with um, building up the intake feature. And those should be very, very comforting. RSong, the demo that we have running today, took about 6-8 weeks. And then if you include some of the bug hunting and re-architecting that took place after the fact, then you could probably, you'd take it out to 10 weeks. And that's 10 weeks of essentially 1.5 developers' time. And then the intake thing is about the same in terms of development time. It's, if we're the work that was done for RSong initially was done with a laser focus. It was very, very specific, really crisp, really clear. And so, but now, and it was a very sort of fast-paced kind of get this done before Archon 3 kind of effort. Now we're working at a not such a death march kind of pace. So but you're still looking at about 10 weeks of dev time to get that feature done. So, if we say that there are roughly 10 features that we're putting together in order to get to market. And again, this is just sort of back of the envelope calculations. You're looking at about 100 weeks, which is 2 years, but you don't have to do them end on end. So if you have more dev, some of those features can be done. But that's effectively, if you think about 2 years worth of dev time, and that's your back of the envelope calculation in terms of dollars.
Greg, I'm sorry, is that development dollars or transaction cost dollars?
That's development dollars. I'm just answering Fabian's question, and then but that doesn't talk about the operations costs, which is what Kent was talking about.
Okay, cool. So when you're done with this, I would like to go back to Kent and try to get some transactional costs.
Yeah, of course.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so if let's say we have, a hot shot, if those, 2 years dev time was with a hot shot dev, so that dev is making, let's say, 150,000. You're talking $300,000, roughly speaking, spread out over some dev, and probably what you're looking at is about a 9-month time frame to get it all done. To the point where you have an offering that you can really take to market. So 9 months, $300,000 is, it's a drop in the bucket. It's entirely achievable for those kinds of things. And so even if we're off by $100,000, so we're off by a third. You're talking less than $500,000, and you're still talking within, say, a year's time frame. Totally doable in today's market. Now, with respect to operational costs, we can actually get much better numbers just by looking at the numbers that we're getting out of RSong today and extrapolating. So you can actually go and look at the implementation and look at the deploys that result in the download of a particular song, and then you're going to have to adjust for streaming, and you can count the transactions that are associated there. And then what Kent was saying comes into play. Does that make sense?
That's super helpful. Yep.
Sure.
Ned, ready to add a couple of more line items to that budget we're building?
Yeah, so has anybody actually gone and done those calculations? That would really be helpful for us. Or who could we ask to do that for us?
I mean, you can kind of do back of the envelope calculations really quickly, right? So if you assume that that we're hyper efficient and there's only one transaction associated with the initiation of a stream, and that's a really conservative estimate. Typically, it might be 3 or 4 transactions associated with the initiation of a stream. Right? So then you can kind of do some estimates in terms of you can on the one hand you can kind of estimate transaction volume, but on the other hand you can kind of get a sense of good price points on the basis of that volume, right? Because you definitely want to have your price sensitive to volume. Does that make sense?
It does. Is there somebody who can help us do those calculations? So we could come up, because we're going to need to put this in our business model.
Yep. Yeah, we need real numbers.
Yeah. So again, your numbers don't have to be that real, right? That you don't have to be like super precise because the software is going to change over the next 9 months.
Absolutely. But right
Right.
now, if we had to put some numbers down, and I don't say we need an answer now, but is there somebody like maybe Kent who would have bandwidth who could take a morning and help us come up with these calculations under like a few different scenarios?
Sure. I mean, you could. I mean, I don't know if I mean Kent is pretty saturated, but I don't want to speak for Kent's time. I mean, but go ahead.
I guess one way to put it is, I'm not sure how helpful I will be in the sense that we don't have our constants down. So I guess you would be asking me, I don't know, I just feel like there's
but
a lot of variables that are
that's a too low a level of detail. You don't want to be estimating against those constants right now anyway. What you want to do is to be estimating at the level of transactions per stream. So if you make an assumption that there's one transaction per stream, which is a conservative assumption on one side and less conservative, it depends on how you look at it. Then what you're really looking at in terms of your cost estimates is how many streams you think are going to be initiated and over what period of time. That's all the numbers you need in order to do proper business analysis here.
I think maybe the person we should reach out to is Chris Bosco. Right.
Honestly, you need a calculator, not a person.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if Fabian and I think we need somebody with a little more of the technical to get this up. I'll reach out to Chris because I think he may be the perfect person for us.
Okay, sure, but again, don't sell yourself short. The level of detail you need is roughly transactions per stream, and then you need to estimate what your volume will be at, say, the 3-month time frame, the 6-month time frame, the 9-month time frame, the 1-year time frame, and so on. Right? And you estimate that on the basis of, well, if we have these artists secured in 3 months and these artists secured in 6 months and so on and so forth, and that's going to give you an estimate on the number of audience members who are likely to go click on your service. It's not an ideal estimate, but it's a decent estimate. That you can let me put it this way, is a defensible estimate.
Yeah, that estimate we could totally come up with, and we will have to do that. I'm talking about now once we have that, and I want to click and play a song, how much rev is it going to cost to execute that stream so it can play in my mobile app?
Yeah, but that the important point is that that number is going to change as a direct result of the total number of people using that service.
Right, because the more people that are on the service, the less it should cost.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So we can, so we could apply some, standard deviation or linear regression to that. That's not a problem.
Right. So then the only number you need then is
number.
Yeah. So the only number you need then is number of transactions per stream. That's it. And then you make an estimate, and that's all you can do, which is how much rev one transaction costs, one deploy costs.
And what is that number?
The point is, you're going to drive that number by the volume. It's not the other way around. The volume is the biggest driver of that number. Do you see what I'm saying?
But I don't see how that. I'm still missing the number on the rev the transaction is going to cost at the different volume levels. Right? I don't know what to multiply it by. Is it
right? Okay. So we can now I understand what your question is.
Okay.
So we can come at this entirely differently, which is.
I lost Greg.
Greg.
Sorry. There was you know how Zoom works on a mobile device. If a call comes in, it automatically interrupts Zoom without giving you an option. Okay, so the way to think about the question you're asking is in terms of the validator economics, right? So to stand up a node or a number of nodes that is going to be high performance enough. Well, let's take a look at what the co-op is currently spending, whatever it is, 17K a month to be able to stand up. I think it's 30 or 40 nodes. And then in order to be more high performance than that, let's say, so that you can handle, so you're doing operations planning to be able to handle millions of listens per week. Right. So let's say you want, I don't know, 25, let's say 50 nodes. You're going to want 50 nodes in that shard. There's almost no contention. So, you can estimate that someone is probably spending on the order of, let's say, 25K a month. So that's the number that's going to drive the transaction fees in addition to the volume. You see what I'm saying? The transaction fees are going to be driven by, is a validator making a profit? And at what point are they making they have to cover their operational fees, and then they're going to charge above that on the basis of the volume. Essentially, is what it comes down to.
Okay, so if we have 25K as a baseline for the cost, and then we don't know what a validator wants to make from a profit, but let's say they're going to charge us 50K a month.
Something like that. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So that's the kind of numbers that you want to look at. So it's going to. If you use one rule of thumb for this kind of estimation is, if you have any data associated with a large scale service sitting on top of AWS, and then you charge a premium above that for the reliability factor that comes with the network, right? The network is giving you all this micropayment infrastructure and essentially a reliability guarantee. It's like, if you kill 2 nodes in the US, 4 more pop up in China. That's essentially the reliability guarantee.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's really good. So if I take like that 50K and I add some accountability for SLAs and all that other stuff, Now I use that to divide into my projected volume, number of transactions per day times 30, it come up to TPS per month,
Yeah.
and divide that into that, and that's going to give me a rough estimate of my transaction costs.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, now I understand exactly where you were going with this, and I can work up some numbers based on this. So
Sweet.
have we done any, so while this is all great, so maybe I need to put the spreadsheets together, and then we can talk about that and see if it actually conforms to some sense of reality or what we've been seeing to date with RSong.
No, that's totally right. That's exactly right. And in fact, you can easily check that against the current service, right? You can look at the current service costs even under, and then just do extrapolation on the basis of the load that we've got to date.
Right. Well, there is no, but nothing's up and actually running at the moment, right?
No, it's all running. What are you talking about? I hand out the link all the time.
Okay, but we don't even have the testnet running.
It doesn't matter. It's running on its own shard.
Okay, so it's using an older version of our node?
No, it's using the most recent version of our node.
Okay, so how is that up and running, but testnet isn't?
The main reason is because Kayvon is only running a few nodes, right? So he doesn't have to worry about. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and so they're not
taxed with respect to consensus.
Okay, so there's no consensus, and they're not bonding and unbonding in a real world.
Exactly. That's
okay.
right.
Okay, so it's a very sandboxed.
It's sandboxed. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
That explains it. Okay.
So that's I think that's been a disconnect that a lot of people don't get, right? It's like there's enough features set in the node right now that it's a fantastic data service.
Okay, gotcha. As long as it's sandboxed and we control it, and we are controlling who the validators are.
That's right.
Gotcha. Okay, now this is really important. Somehow I myself didn't really get that. So
I want to thank Kent for making an appearance in today's meeting, as it activated this conversation, which is something that Ned and I have been going back and forth about and trying to figure out the economics of this proposition. So thank you, Kent, for being here, and and Greg, thank you so much for digging in deep with all of us on this specific topic. And now
I really appreciate the patience.